Oh, God, that's huge, Amara Jones gasped, the words ripping from her throat like shattered diamonds as she stared at the weapon Yoon Ye-jun casually placed on the marble counter between them. Even as her body pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse suite, Lagos's glittering skyline below spread out like conquered territory bought with blood and calculated violence. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the sleek black metal that represented everything she'd tried to escape. Yoon stood close enough that she could feel the lethal stillness radiating from his lean, muscular frame. Close enough to see the dragon tattoo that seemed to breathe with each rise of his chest, its scales catching the dim amber light from the city below. The man they whispered about in Lagos's underground networks. The youngest Korean Mafia boss to ever establish a West African empire. Though she'd only learned that devastating detail 5 minutes ago when she found the photographs hidden in his desk drawer. Photos of her, taken over the past 6 months, cataloging every moment of her life. The rain hammered against the cheap hotel window like accusations Amara Jones couldn't escape. 6 months ago, she'd been a bride. 3 months ago, she'd been a victim. Today, she was a ghost haunting Lagos's Lekki district, hiding in a rental apartment that smelled of mold and broken promises. Her wedding dress hung in the closet like a corpse, the intricate beading she'd saved 2 years to afford, now mocking her with memories of Dakarai's fists and his family's laughter when she'd tried to fight back. The traditional Ghanaian kente patterns woven into the white silk had been her mother's contribution, a bridge between her Nigerian upbringing and the Ghanaian man she'd thought would love her. Instead, Dakarai Mensah had loved control, loved humiliation, loved the way his mother, Ifua, would smile when he backhanded Amara across the dinner table for serving the jollof rice too spicy. The wedding had been a trap disguised as a celebration, and she'd walked into it wearing hope like cheap perfume. Amara traced the fading bruise on her left shoulder blade, the one shaped like Dakarai's class ring. She'd escaped 3 months ago during his business trip to Accra, taking nothing but her identification documents and the cash she'd hidden in the lining of her makeup bag. 200,000 naira, approximately $250. Enough to disappear, but not enough to truly vanish. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, and her heart seized. Unknown number. They always came from unknown numbers. Dakarai's brothers, Kwame and Kofi, hunting her like she was property that had wandered off the plantation. She'd changed her SIM card 4 times, but somehow they always found her. She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled on her only pair of jeans without holes and the green blouse she'd bought from a street vendor in Aja. Her natural hair, which Afua had called too wild and unprofessional, was pulled into a simple bun. The mirror showed her what survival looked like. 28 years old, curvy in ways that had made Dakarai's family call her too much woman, while simultaneously mocking her for not being woman enough to keep their son satisfied. But her eyes, those hadn't broken yet. Dark brown, intelligent, calculating. She'd graduated top of her class in business administration from the University of Lagos 5 years ago. Her brain was her weapon, even when everything else had been taken. The cheap burner phone buzzed again. Different number. Her stomach knotted. She grabbed her small purse and headed for the door, her survival instinct screaming that staying in one place too long was asking for Dakarai to find her. Lagos at sunset was organized chaos. Danfo buses belching exhaust, street vendors shouting their wares, the perpetual smell of suya grilling on open flames mixing with ocean salt from the Atlantic. Amara navigated through the Lekki Phase 1 crowds with practiced ease, her eyes constantly scanning for the black Mercedes G-Wagon that Kwame drove, or the silver Lexus that belonged to Kofi. She ducked into a small cafe called The Bean House, a place she'd discovered 2 weeks ago. It was run by a young woman named Chidinma, who never asked questions and made the best chin-chin Amara had tasted since leaving her mother's house in Surulere. The usual? Chidinma asked, her Igbo accent thick and comforting. Please. Amara slid into the corner booth, positioning herself where she could see both entrances. Old habits from living with Dakarai, who'd taught her through brutal experience that a woman who didn't anticipate his arrival was a woman asking to be disciplined. She pulled out the battered notepad she'd been using to plan her next move. She needed a new identity, a real one, not just a changed SIM card. That required money she didn't have and connections to people who operated in Lagos's shadow economy. People her business administration degree had never prepared her to navigate. The cafe door chimed, and Amara's head snapped up automatically. A man entered, and the entire energy of the room shifted like someone had changed the atmospheric pressure. He was Korean, tall for his ethnicity at approximately 6 feet, with sharp features that could have been carved from jade. His black suit was custom-tailored, the kind that cost more than Amara's entire year's salary at the small accounting firm where she'd worked before Dakarai had forced her to quit. His hair was styled in an undercut, the longer top portion swept back with precision, but it was his eyes that made Amara's breath catch. Dark, assessing, intelligent, they swept the cafe with the clinical efficiency of someone who cataloged threats the way other people notice the weather. Those eyes landed on her and stopped. Amara felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing, a pressure against her chest that made her want to simultaneously run and stay frozen. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just looked at her with an intensity that suggested he was memorizing every detail of her face, her posture, the way her fingers had unconsciously clenched around her pen. Then he turned to the counter, ordered something in English so lightly accented it was almost neutral, and took a seat 3 tables away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive with notes of bergamot and cedar, far enough to maintain plausible deniability that he was interested, but he was. Amara's survival instincts, honed by 3 months of running and a year of abuse before that, screamed the truth. This man had noticed her deliberately, was watching her even now though his eyes were fixed on his phone. She should leave. Every rational part of her brain demanded she gather her things and exit immediately. Men who looked like walking danger in $5,000 suits were not safe harbors in storms. Yet, she stayed, because something in the way he'd looked at her, clinical, yes, but not predatory in the way Dakarai's brothers looked at her, suggested a different kind of danger. The calculated kind. The kind you could potentially negotiate with if you were smart enough. Amara returned to her notepad, but her handwriting had changed. Shakier, more aware. She wrote the words, "New identity, how?" and underlined them twice, her mind already working through scenarios. 15 minutes passed. Her tea grew cold. Chidma brought her a small plate of puff-puff without being asked, the fried dough still warm and sweet. Amara murmured her thanks but didn't eat, her appetite strangled by hyper-awareness. The Korean man stood. Amara's peripheral vision tracked him as he walked toward the exit, his movements economical and precise. He would pass directly by her table. As he drew level with her booth, he paused for exactly 3 seconds. His voice, when he spoke, was low and measured, with the kind of authority that didn't need volume to command attention. You're looking for a way to disappear. Not a question. A statement. The people hunting you won't stop with phone calls much longer. Amara's blood froze. She looked up at him, her mind racing through possibilities. Was he working with Dakarai? Was this a trap? But his expression held no mockery, no malice, just an unsettling knowing, as if he'd read her entire history in the 15 minutes they'd shared this space. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You do." He reached into his suit jacket, and Amara's hand instinctively moved toward the small pepper spray in her purse, but he only withdrew a business card, placing it on the table with 2 fingers. "When you're ready to actually vanish instead of just hiding, call that number." He walked away before she could respond, the cafe door chiming his exit like a period at the end of a sentence she didn't understand yet. Amara stared at the card. Heavy stock. Expensive. No name. Just a phone number embossed in silver ink and a small symbol in the corner, a dragon coiled around a lotus flower. She should throw it away, should burn it and scatter the ashes. Instead, she slipped it into her purse next to the pepper spray, her heart pounding with something that felt dangerously close to hope. 3 days later, Amara's hotel room door shook with violent pounding at 2 in the morning. "Amara, we know you're in there!" Kwame's voice, slurred with alcohol and rage. "Come out now or we're breaking this door down." She'd been asleep, dreaming of her mother's kitchen and the smell of egusi soup. Reality crashed back with the force of Kwame's fists against cheap wood. Amara rolled out of bed, her mind already calculating. The window led to a fire escape. She'd chosen this room specifically for that escape route. Her bag was always packed, a habit born from 3 months of running. "You embarrassed our family!" Kofi's voice joined his brother's. "Dakarai is humiliated. You will come back and apologize, or we will make you apologize." The door frame cracked. They were actually going to break it down. Amara grabbed her bag, shoved her feet into sneakers, and was at the window when the door splintered open. Kwame stood in the doorway, his expensive Agbada traditional wear incongruous with the fury twisting his face. Behind him, Kofi held a thick walking stick, the same one their father had used to discipline servants. "There she is," Kwame snarled, "the ungrateful whore who thinks she's too good for the Mensa family." Amara's hand closed around the business card in her pocket. The decision crystallized in that moment, not a choice, but an inevitability. She ran. Out the window, down the fire escape, her sneakers clanging against metal as Kwame's shouts followed her into Lagos's pre-dawn darkness. She ran until her lungs burned, until the distance between her and that hotel room felt like miles instead of blocks. Then she stopped in an empty parking lot near a closed shopping complex, pulled out her burner phone, and dialed the number on the card. It rang once before a voice answered. Not the Korean man's voice. This one was younger, speaking English with a Seoul accent. Location? Amara rattled off the intersection, her breath coming in gasps. Stay visible. 3 minutes. The line went dead. She stood under a streetlight, making herself an obvious target, trusting a stranger because the devils she knew were worse than the one she didn't. A black Range Rover pulled up in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. The back door opened, and the Korean man from the cafe sat in the shadows of the leather interior, his expression unchanged from their first meeting. Get in, Amara Jones, he said quietly. She hesitated for exactly 5 seconds, long enough to acknowledge this was insane. Then she climbed into the vehicle, and the door closed behind her like the ceiling of a tomb or the opening of a fortress. She wouldn't know which until it was too late to matter. The Range Rover pulled away from the curb with smooth precision. Amara's breathing slowly steadied as the adrenaline began to ebb, replaced by a creeping awareness of her situation. She was in a vehicle with a complete stranger, a dangerous stranger if her instincts were correct, wearing only the thin tank top and shorts she'd slept in, her bag clutched to her chest like a shield. You know my name, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. No point in asking how. Men with his kind of resources knew everything they wanted to know. Yoon Ye-jun, he replied, extending his hand in a gesture that seemed absurdly formal given the circumstances. And yes, I know quite a bit about you, Miss Jones. Business administration degree from Unilag. Graduated with first-class honors, worked at Adebayo & Associates accounting firm until 14 months ago when Dakarai Mensa convinced you to quit. Married him 6 months ago in what I'm told was a beautiful ceremony in Lekki. Disappeared 3 months ago after his family's hospitality became unbearable. Each fact landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading through Amara's consciousness. He'd investigated her, thoroughly. Why? The question emerged sharper than intended. Why would you bother learning about some random woman hiding in Lagos? Yoon's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his dark eyes. Not warmth, but perhaps respect for her directness. Because I don't believe in random, Miss Jones. I saw you in that cafe 2 weeks ago, actually. Not 3 days ago. That was the 4th time I'd observed you. Each time you positioned yourself strategically, watched the exits, never fully relaxed. You have the situational awareness of someone who's been hunted. That interested me. So you're a stalker. Amara's fingers tightened on her bag. That's not exactly reassuring. I'm a businessman who recognizes assets. He leaned back against the leather seat, his suit unmarred despite the early hour. You're intelligent, resourceful, and you've survived 3 months evading the Mensa family's considerable reach in Lagos. That requires skill. I appreciate skill. The Range Rover turned onto a private road, palm trees lining the route like sentries. Amara's pulse quickened. Where are we going? Somewhere the Mensa brothers won't find you. Yoon pulled out a tablet, swiped through several screens, then turned it toward her. This is the CCTV footage from your hotel lobby 20 minutes ago. Watch. The video showed Kwame and Kofi storming through the lobby, the night manager cowering as they demanded Amara's room number. When he hesitated, Kofi smashed a vase. The manager gave them a key card. They bribed the staff 2 days ago, Yoon explained, his voice clinical. The manager texted them your room number when you returned tonight. You were already compromised before you even walked through that door. Amara's stomach twisted. She'd thought she was being careful, thought she'd covered her tracks. How do you have this footage? I own the hotel. He said it the way someone might mention owning a watch. A simple statement of fact. I own many properties in Lagos. The Mensa family is persistent, but their methods are crude, easy to track. The vehicle stopped in front of a massive gate, modern and imposing. Beyond it, Amara could see a sprawling compound, low-slung modern architecture mixed with tropical landscaping, security lights casting everything in amber and shadow. What do you want from me? Amara asked, because men like Yoon Ye-jun didn't help women like her out of kindness. Everything had a price. Honesty, he said, meeting her eyes directly. I'm going to offer you protection from the Mensa family. Complete protection. New identity, new life, resources to disappear so thoroughly they'll never find you. In exchange, I want you to work for me. Doing what? Her mind was already calculating, weighing options. Working for a man who owned hotels and had access to CCTV systems across Lagos was probably not legal or simple. What you're good at. Analysis, pattern recognition. You have a degree in business administration and a natural talent for seeing connections others miss. I've read your university thesis on detecting financial fraud through behavioral patterns. I have businesses that require someone with those skills. He didn't say legal businesses, Amara noted, but he also wasn't lying or trying to pretty up the offer. There was something almost refreshing about his directness after Dakarai's constant gaslighting and manipulation. And if I refuse? She asked, though they both knew she couldn't. Then I'll have my driver take you anywhere in Lagos you'd like to go, and you can continue running from the Mensa family until they eventually catch you. Yoon's expression remained neutral, but his words carried weight, which, based on their escalating behavior and your dwindling resources, I estimate will happen within 2 weeks, maybe 3 if you're exceptionally lucky. Amara looked out at the compound, at the promise of safety it represented. Every instinct screamed this was dangerous, that Yoon Ye-jun was not a savior, but a different kind of threat. Yet he'd been honest about his intentions, transparent about the transaction. That was more than Dakarai had ever offered. I want to know what I'm actually signing up for, she said firmly, turning back to face him. No vague promises. What exactly are these businesses? What would I be analyzing? For the first time, Yoon's lips curved into something that might have been a smile if it had reached his eyes. Smart. Come inside, Miss Jones. Let's discuss the details over breakfast. Then you can make an informed decision. The gate opened, and the Range Rover pulled through into what Amara was beginning to realize might be either her salvation or her damnation, possibly both. The compound's interior was stunning in its minimalist luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked an infinity pool that seemed to merge with Lagos's skyline in the distance. The furniture was sleek, modern, expensive without being ostentatious. Everything was in shades of black, white, and gray, with occasional touches of deep blue. A woman in professional attire appeared, Korean, middle-aged, her expression carefully neutral. Yoon spoke to her in rapid Korean, and she nodded before disappearing down a hallway. Mrs. Han will prepare a room for you, Yoon said, gesturing for Amara to follow him toward what appeared to be a dining area. You'll want to shower and change before we talk. I took the liberty of having clothes prepared in your size. Of course you did, Amara muttered, but followed him. The dining room held a table that could seat 12, but only 2 places were set, facing the windows and the slowly lightening sky. Dawn was perhaps 30 minutes away. The bathroom is through that door. Yoon indicated a hallway to the left. Take your time. We'll eat when you're ready. Amara found herself in a guest suite that was larger than her entire hotel room had been. The bathroom was marble and chrome, with a rainfall shower and towels so plush they felt like clouds. On the bed, she found clothing laid out, jeans in her exact size, a simple but elegant blouse, undergarments still in packaging, and comfortable flats. She showered quickly, hyper-aware that she was naked and vulnerable in a stranger's house, no matter how luxurious. But the hot water and expensive soap helped clear her head, washing away the panic of Kwame and Kofi's attack and leaving room for her analytical mind to engage. Yoon Ye-jun was not operating from altruism. He'd investigated her, knew her patterns, owned the hotel where she'd been staying. This was calculated, purposeful. He'd positioned himself as her only viable option with the precision of someone who was very, very good at getting what he wanted. The question was, what exactly did he want? Amara dressed in the provided clothes. They fit perfectly, which was both impressive and unsettling, and returned to the dining room. Food had appeared in her absence, a spread of both Korean and Nigerian breakfast items. Kimchi and rice sat alongside jollof rice and fried plantains, coffee and fresh orange juice. It was thoughtful in a way that made her suspicious. Yoon sat at his place, already eating, his movements efficient and precise. He'd removed his suit jacket, his white shirt rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms marked with more tattoo work. She caught glimpses of what might be characters or symbols in Hangul script. Eat, he said simply, not looking up from the tablet he was scrolling through. Amara sat, serving herself plantains and eggs. She was hungry. The adrenaline crash had left her ravenous, but she kept her portions small, maintaining control. You were going to explain what these businesses entail. I was. Yoon set down his tablet, giving her his full attention in that unnerving way of his. I run import-export operations throughout West Africa. Legitimate operations, he added, perhaps reading her skepticism. Textiles, electronics, automotive parts. However, the margins in legitimate trade are thin, the competition brutal. To maintain market dominance, I need advantages. What kind of advantages? Information advantages, knowing which competitors are cooking their books, which government officials can be persuaded to favorable decisions, which shipping routes are about to become politically complicated. I need someone who can analyze financial documents, behavior patterns, communication networks, and identify vulnerabilities or opportunities before my competitors do. It sounded almost reasonable when he framed it that way. Almost. And the illegitimate parts? Yoon's eyes gleamed with something that might have been approval. I also facilitate certain transactions that exist in legal gray areas. Not drugs, not human trafficking. I don't touch anything that harms the vulnerable. But weapons, information, services for people who can't access traditional banking systems. These operations require discretion and intelligence analysis even more than the legitimate businesses. So you're offering me a job as a corporate spy and criminal analyst? Amara said it flatly, making sure she understood exactly what was being proposed. Yes, the honesty was almost jarring. Dakarai had never been honest about anything, had presented himself as a respectable businessman while being neither respectable nor particularly good at business. Yoon was laying out his criminal enterprises over breakfast, like they were discussing a normal job offer. And if I'm caught, Amara pressed, if your operations get exposed, you won't be. No hesitation. I've been operating in West Africa for 6 years without a single arrest, without even serious investigation. I'm careful, Miss Jones, meticulous. My people are protected. Loyalty through pragmatism, Amara observed. You keep them safe. They keep you profitable. Exactly. Yoon picked up his coffee, studying her over the rim. You understand power dynamics. That's useful. Amara ate a piece of plantain, buying time to think. This was insane. She should refuse, should demand he take her anywhere else, should not be considering working for what was essentially a crime syndicate. But the Mensa family wouldn't stop hunting her. Her savings were nearly gone. And if she was honest with herself, the prospect of using her intelligence, the education she'd worked so hard for, instead of just surviving day to day was seductive. Dakarai had made her quit her job, had spent a year grinding down her confidence and autonomy. Yoon was offering her a chance to rebuild those things, even if the context was morally complicated. I want protection not just for myself, she said, making her decision and immediately moving to negotiate terms. My mother lives in Surulere. If the Mensas can't find me, they might try to leverage her. She needs to be safe. Already arranged. Yoon pulled up something on his tablet, turned it toward her. Mrs. Folick Jones, age 56, works as a nurse at General Hospital Ikeja. As of yesterday, she has a security detail she doesn't know about. 2 of my people watching her residence and workplace. The Mensas won't touch her. The image showed her mother walking into the hospital, completely unaware of the 2 men in casual clothing trailing at a distance. Amara's throat tightened. He'd protected her mother before even making this offer, which meant he'd been certain she would accept. Arrogant, but not wrong. What else? Yoon asked, reading her expression correctly. I want actual training. If I'm going to analyze criminal operations, I need to understand them fully, not just financially, but operationally. How they work, what the risks are, how to protect myself if something goes wrong. Agreed. You'll train with my security team in self-defense and tactical awareness. You'll also work alongside my current analyst, Tunde Afolayan, for the first 3 months to learn the systems. I want the option to leave. Amara said it knowing it was probably impossible, but needing to establish some boundary. If this becomes something I can't stomach, I want to be able to walk away. Yoon was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, if you wish to leave after proving yourself trustworthy and completing a minimum 2-year commitment, I'll facilitate your departure. New identity, relocation anywhere in the world, sufficient funds to start over. But if you betray me or my operations before that point, I will end you. Not the Mensa family, me. Do you understand? The threat was delivered in the same measured tone he'd used to offer her breakfast. Amara believed every word. I understand. Then we have an agreement, Miss Jones. Yoon extended his hand across the table. Amara looked at that hand, scarred knuckles capable of violence but offered in partnership, and made her choice. She clasped it firmly, sealing a deal that would either save her life or destroy it entirely. His grip was strong, warm, and brief. When he released her hand, something in the air between them had shifted. She was no longer a victim he'd rescued. She was an asset he'd acquired. Somehow that felt more stable than anything she'd experienced in the past 18 months. You'll stay here while we establish your new identity, Yoon said, returning to business mode seamlessly. Mrs. Han will show you to your permanent quarters after breakfast. Tunde will arrive this afternoon to begin your orientation. In 2 weeks, you'll officially be Zainab Okonkwo, a data analyst hired through a legitimate recruitment agency to work for one of my subsidiary companies. Everything will be documented, traceable, legal on the surface. Zainab. Amara tested the name. It felt foreign on her tongue, but not unpleasant. Muslim name for a Christian woman. Nigeria is diverse. No one will question it, especially with proper documentation. You'll keep your faith, your personality, everything that makes you yourself, just with a different name on paper and a history that doesn't include the Mensa family. The sun was fully rising now, painting Lagos's skyline in golds and pinks. From this vantage point, the city looked almost beautiful instead of chaotic. Amara wondered if this was how Yoon saw everything, from a distance, controlled, aesthetic. "Why me?" she asked, the question she'd been circling around finally emerging. "You could hire analysts anywhere. Why specifically invest this much effort in protecting and recruiting me?" Yoon stood, collecting his plate with the same efficient movements he applied to everything. "Because you survived a year of systematic abuse with your intelligence intact. Because you escaped with limited resources and managed to evade a family with considerable local influence for 3 months. Because when I investigated you, every person who knew you academically described you as brilliant, and every person who knew you personally described you as kind." He paused at the doorway, looking back at her. "I can train for brilliance. I can't train for resilience and integrity. You have both." He left before she could respond, leaving Amara alone with the sunrise and the strange, unsettling warmth blooming in her chest at being seen, truly seen, for the first time in longer than she could remember. Mrs. Han appeared 20 minutes later to show her to her new quarters, a full apartment within the compound, complete with bedroom, bathroom, small kitchen, and living area. It was more space than Amara had ever had to herself, furnished simply but comfortably. "Master Yoon says you are to rest today," Mrs. Han said in careful English. "Tomorrow, training begins. I will bring lunch at 1 o'clock, dinner at 7. You need anything, you press this button." She indicated a panel near the door. "Someone will come immediately." "Thank you, Mrs. Han." The older woman nodded and withdrew, closing the door softly behind her. Amara stood in the center of her new living room, her bag still clutched in her hand, the only possession she'd managed to keep from her old life. Slowly, she set it down on the couch, walked to the window that overlooked the compound's gardens, let herself, for just a moment, imagine a life where she wasn't running, where her brain was an asset instead of a liability, where someone like Yoon Ye-jun saw her value and protected it instead of trying to diminish it. It was dangerous to hope. Hope made you vulnerable, made you easy to disappoint, but as Amara watched the palm trees sway in Lagos's morning breeze, she allowed herself this small rebellion. She hoped this might actually work. Behind her, her phone, her old burner phone, buzzed one final time. A message from an unknown number. "We will find you, Amara. And when we do, you will beg Dakarai for forgiveness on your knees." She read it once, then removed the SIM card and snapped it in half, tossed both pieces in the trash. That woman, Amara Jones, the bride who had tried so hard to make a terrible marriage work, was dead. Whoever Zainab Okonkwo would become was still being written. And for the first time in 18 months, Amara was holding the pen. Tunde Afolayan arrived precisely at 2 o'clock that afternoon, and Amara understood immediately why Yoon trusted him. The man was built like a former athlete gone soft around the edges, probably mid-40s, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the confident posture of someone comfortable in his own expertise. "Miss Okonkwo," he greeted her with a slight smile, using her new name without hesitation. "Welcome to the organization. I understand you have a background in business administration and financial analysis." They were in what Yoon called the operations room, a converted library filled with computers, multiple monitors, filing systems, and a massive digital board displaying what appeared to be shipping routes, financial data, and personnel information in multiple languages. "I do," Amara confirmed, studying the setup with growing interest, "though I've never worked with data at this scale." "You will now." Tunde gestured her toward one of the workstations. "Master Yoon's empire spans 14 countries across West and Central Africa. We manage approximately $200 million in annual trade, 60% legitimate, 40% in the gray markets. Your job is to ensure the 40% stays invisible while the 60% appears beyond reproach." He pulled up a series of financial documents on the screen before her. "This is a shipping company based in Cotonou, Benin. On paper, they transport textiles and automotive parts. In reality, 40% of their containers carry modified electronics that circumvent import taxes and weapons components that never appear on manifests. Can you identify the discrepancy patterns?" Amara leaned forward, her analytical mind engaging like a muscle she'd forgotten she had. The documents showed standard shipping invoices, customs declarations, and financial statements. But as she compared them, patterns emerged. weight discrepancies that were too consistent to be random, payment timings that didn't align with stated shipping schedules, secondary accounts receiving funds that didn't appear on the primary ledgers. Here, she pointed to a series of transactions. The weights declared for textile shipments are averaging 15% higher than industry standard for similar volumes. And these payment dates, they're precisely 7 days after the official delivery dates, but the fund sources aren't the stated buyers. Excellent. Tunde's approval was genuine. Most people take weeks to spot that pattern. You saw it in minutes. What does it tell you? That the textile shipments are cover for heavier goods, and the real buyers are paying through intermediary accounts to maintain deniability. Amara's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up additional documents. These secondary accounts, if I trace them back, they'll probably lead to defense contractors or private security firms who can't be seen directly purchasing certain items. Precisely. Tunde opened another file. Now, how would you hide this better? Master Yoon believes in continuous improvement. If you can identify our weaknesses, you can strengthen them. For the next 4 hours, Amara lost herself in the work. It was intoxicating, using her education, her natural pattern recognition abilities, her intelligence in ways that felt powerful instead of suppressed. Tunde was an excellent teacher, pushing her to think 3 steps ahead, to consider not just how to hide illegal operations, but how to anticipate investigation patterns and preemptively neutralize them. "You're a natural at this," Tunde said as they wrapped up the session. "Master Yoon rarely makes mistakes in his recruitment choices, but you exceed even his assessment." Amara felt pride flare warm in her chest, something she hadn't experienced since graduating university. "Thank you. When do I start working on active operations?" "Tomorrow you'll shadow me on a live analysis. We're currently monitoring a situation in Lomé, Togo. One of our partner operations may have been compromised. Your fresh perspective could identify angles I've missed." Tunde stood, stretching. "But tonight you have tactical training with Instructor Park. Master Yoon insists all personnel with access to sensitive information know how to protect themselves physically." "I've never fought anyone in my life," Amara admitted. Well, she'd tried to fight back against Dakurai exactly once, and that had ended with a cracked rib and a lesson about knowing when she was outmatched. "Then tonight, you learn how to stop being prey." Tunde's expression softened slightly. "Master Yoon shared limited details about your background, but enough for me to understand why this matters to him. You'll be safe here, Miss Okonkwo. We protect our own." After Tunde left, Amara had exactly 30 minutes before her first self-defense session. She used the time to call her mother from a secure line Yoon had provided, untraceable, encrypted, the technology far beyond anything she'd encountered in civilian life. "Amara?" Her mother's voice cracked with relief and worry. "Oh, my baby, where have you been? I've been so worried." "I'm safe, Mama." Amara's throat tightened. "I can't tell you where, not yet, but I'm safe, I have work, and I need you to trust me." "The Mensahs came to the hospital," Folak said quietly. "Kwame and Kofi. They said you stole from them, said you were sick in the head and needed to come home for treatment. I told them I hadn't heard from you, but Amara, they scared me. They won't bother you again." Amara injected certainty into her voice she didn't entirely feel. "I promise you, Mama, just, if they come back, don't engage with them. Walk away, call hospital security. Can you do that for me? You found someone to help you." Not a question. Her mother had always been perceptive. Someone powerful. "Yes. Is this someone going to hurt you too?" The question landed like a fist to the sternum. Amara thought about Yoon's calculated kindness, his transparent criminality, the way he'd protected her mother before even securing Amara's agreement to work for him. Was he dangerous? Absolutely. Would he hurt her? Possibly, if she betrayed him. But there was a difference between the casual cruelty Dakurai had dealt out and the pragmatic ruthlessness Yoon embodied. "Not the way Dakurai did," Amara said finally. "This person sees my value, Mama, respects my intelligence. That's new." Folak was quiet for a long moment. "Then be careful, my daughter. People who value you for what you can do for them aren't the same as people who value you for who you are." "I know, Mama. I love you. I love you too. Call me again soon? As often as I can." Amara ended the call and sat with her mother's warning ringing in her ears. Folak wasn't wrong. Yoon valued her utility, her skills, her potential as an asset. But after Dakurai, who had valued her for nothing except as a target for his anger and his family's contempt, utility felt like an upgrade. Instructor Park turned out to be a compact woman in her 30s, Korean, with a kind of lean muscle that spoke of dedicated training and zero tolerance for excuses. She wore simple athletic wear and had her black hair pulled into a severe ponytail. "You're Zainab?" Park asked, looking Amara up and down with an assessing gaze. "Boss says you need to learn how to not die if someone attacks you. That true?" That's true, Amara confirmed. Good. Honesty is important. Take off your shoes. Get on the mat. Park indicated the large training mat that dominated one section of the compound's gym. First lesson. Most women who've never fought make the same mistakes. They apologize, they pull punches, they worry about looking aggressive or mean. You will do none of these things with me. Understood? Understood. For the next 2 hours, Instructor Park systematically dismantled everything Amara thought she knew about physical conflict. She learned that violence, real violence, had no room for hesitation or fairness. Learned where to strike to disable an attacker: eyes, throat, groin, knees. Learned how to use her body weight and leverage against larger opponents. Learned that the goal wasn't to win a fight but to create enough chaos to escape. Your curves are an advantage, not a weakness, Park said at one point, demonstrating a hip throw that used Amara's lower center of gravity to devastating effect. Men like the ones who hurt you before? They expect you to be soft, easy to control. You're going to teach them different. By the end of the session, Amara was drenched in sweat, her muscles screaming, her knuckles scraped from striking the heavy bag. But she felt something she'd never experienced before. Capable. Dangerous, even in a small way. You'll train with me every day for the next month, Park said as they cooled down. After that, 3 times a week until boss decides you're competent. Questions? Just one, Amara panted. How long have you worked for Yoon? 4 years. He pulled me out of a bad situation in Seoul, gave me purpose and protection. I'd die for him. Park said it simply, like stating the weather. Most of us here would. He doesn't demand loyalty. He earns it by being fair and ruthless in exactly the right proportions. You'll understand eventually. After Park left, Amara showered in the gym's facilities, letting the hot water soothe her abused muscles. When she emerged, she found Yoon waiting in the gym seating area, reviewing something on his phone. He looked up as she approached, his expression neutral but attentive. Instructor Park says you have good instincts, he said without preamble. She also says you hesitated before striking the practice dummy when instructed to aim for the throat. Why? Amara toweled her hair, considering her answer. Because I've never deliberately tried to hurt anyone before. It felt wrong. It should feel wrong, Yoon replied, standing. Violence should never be casual or easy. But necessary violence, the kind that protects you or the people you care about, is different from cruelty. You'll learn to distinguish between them. He started walking toward the main compound building, and Amara fell into step beside him. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Lagos's evening sounds drifted over the compound walls, traffic, music, the eternal pulse of the city. Tunde tells me you identified patterns in 4 hours that took him 2 weeks when he first started, Yoon continued. You have a gift for this work, Miss Okonkwo. The new name still felt strange, but Amara was beginning to adapt to it. It helps that I'm genuinely interested. The complexity is fascinating. Most people would find the moral implications concerning. Most people haven't spent a year being systematically degraded by their husband and his family. Amara heard the bitterness in her own voice and didn't bother to hide it. Your operations circumvent unjust taxes and provide goods to people who need them but can't access legitimate channels. Dakarai beat me for burning rice. Morally speaking, you're an upgrade. Yoon's lips curved into something that might have been amusement. That's a depressingly low bar, but I'll accept the compliment. They reached the main building's entrance, but instead of going inside, Yoon turned to face her directly. The Mensa family is still looking for you. Kwame filed a missing persons report yesterday, claiming you're mentally unstable and a danger to yourself. They're trying to get police cooperation in the search. Amara's stomach clenched. Can they do that? They're trying. It won't work. I've ensured certain officials understand that pursuing this would be counterproductive to their interests, but it indicates they're not giving up. Yoon's dark eyes studied her face. How does that make you feel? Angry, Amara said honestly, and scared, but mostly angry. They spent a year breaking me down, and now they can't accept that I escaped. They want me back just to finish what they started. They'll never touch you again. Yoon said it with absolute certainty. But I need to know you won't break if they escalate, if they try to use your mother, if they spread lies about you publicly, if they become more desperate. Can you stay focused on your work despite that pressure? It was a fair question. A month ago, Amara might have crumbled under that kind of sustained assault, but something had shifted in the past 3 days. The analytical work with Tunde, the physical empowerment from Park's training, the simple fact of being valued for her intelligence instead of mocked for it. I can, she said firmly. They want me to be the weak thing they tried to make me. I'm choosing to be something else. Good. Yoon held her gaze for a moment longer, and Amara felt that same unsettling intensity she'd experienced in the cafe. The sense of being completely seen, cataloged, understood. Then he nodded once and turned toward the door. "Dinner in 20 minutes. Mrs. Han has prepared Korean-Nigerian fusion, apparently. She's very excited about it." The next 2 weeks blurred together in a storm of activity and transformation. Amara's days developed a rhythm. Mornings with Tunde analyzing financial documents, shipping manifests, communications intercepts. Afternoons with Instructor Park learning how to break bones and escape holds. Evenings reviewing case studies of successful operations and failed ones, identifying the variables that made the difference. Her new identity as Zainab Okonkwo was finalized, complete with a fabricated employment history, educational credentials that matched her real ones but under a different name, even social media profiles backdated 2 years showing a quiet life as a data analyst in Abuja before her recent transfer to Lagos. "It's thorough," Amara said to Yoon one evening as they reviewed the documentation in his private office. The room was all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive desk that probably cost more than a car. "Almost too thorough. If anyone investigates deeply, they'll find exactly what we want them to find," Yoon interrupted smoothly. "Boring consistency? A woman who pays her taxes on time, has no criminal record, no interesting associations. Investigators look for anomalies, Miss Okonkwo. We've made you perfectly anomaly-free." He had a point. Amara studied the woman in the ID photo, herself but different. The photographer had caught her with a neutral expression, professional blouse, hair pulled back. She looked capable, unremarkable, exactly the kind of person who would disappear into the background of any office environment. "When do I start working in the field?" she asked. "Tomorrow, actually." Yoon pulled up something on his computer, rotating the screen toward her. "We have a meeting with a potential partner in Victoria Island, a Lebanese businessman named Rafik Hariri, who wants to establish a supply chain for construction materials. On paper, it's entirely legitimate. In practice, he's interested in facilitating certain equipment transfers that can't go through official channels. You want me there for the meeting. I want you to analyze him. Read his body language, his financial documents, his proposals. Tell me if he's trustworthy or if he's setting up a con. Tunde will attend as well, but I value a fresh perspective." It was a test, Amara realized. Not just of her analytical skills, but of her composure under pressure, her ability to operate in the world Yoon inhabited. "What should I wear?" "Business professional. You're my new analyst, recently hired, being introduced to key partners. Play it confident but not aggressive, intelligent but not challenging. Can you do that?" Amara thought about all the business presentations she'd given at university, all the client meetings at her old accounting firm. This was the same thing, just with higher stakes and criminal implications. "I can do that." The meeting was held in a private room at a luxury hotel in Victoria Island, the kind of place where bottles of wine cost more than Amara used to make in a week. Rafik Hariri was exactly what Amara expected. Mid-50s, expensive suit, gold jewelry, the kind of confident swagger that came from years of successful deals. He greeted Yoon with the casual warmth of established business relationships, then turned his attention to Amara and Tunde with polite curiosity. "And these are?" he asked in English flavored with French-Lebanese accents. "My analysts," Yoon said smoothly. "Tunde Afolayan and Zainab Okonkwo. They'll be reviewing the documentation for our potential partnership." Hariri's eyes lingered on Amara for a moment too long. Not sexually, but assessingly. She met his gaze calmly, pulling out a portfolio and tablet with practiced efficiency. First test, would he dismiss her as decoration or recognize her as functional? "Ms. Okonkwo," he said finally, nodding respectfully. "I look forward to your analysis." Good. He'd chosen recognition. For the next hour, they discussed the proposed partnership, shipping routes from Beirut to Lagos, construction materials that could be rebranded and resold throughout West Africa, payment structures that utilized cryptocurrency and traditional banking in strategic combinations. On the surface, it was sophisticated, but legal. Amara took notes, asked pointed questions about volume projections and margin expectations, and watched Hariri's micro-expressions. He was smooth, practiced, clearly experienced in these negotiations, but something felt slightly off. Not quite wrong, but not quite right either. "Could we review the supplier contracts?" she asked during a brief pause. "I'd like to verify the quality certifications match the pricing structures you've proposed." Hariri produced the documents without hesitation, which was either a good sign or evidence he'd prepared very thoroughly for scrutiny. Amara scanned through them, her analytical mind cataloging details, comparing figures, looking for the telltale inconsistencies she'd learned to spot. There, a subsidiary company listed as the primary supplier that showed up in 3 different documentation sets with slightly different registration numbers. Not necessarily fraudulent, but sloppy. And sloppiness in one area often indicated sloppiness in others. Your primary supplier, Al-Banaa Materials, Amara said carefully. They're showing different registration numbers across these documents. Can you clarify which is current? The room's temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Hariri's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, and Tunde's eyes widened slightly. Yoon remained motionless, but Amara felt his attention sharpen like a blade. Ah, that, Hariri said smoothly. We restructured earlier this year. The older documents show the previous registration. The newer ones reflect the updated information. Simple administrative transition. Of course, Amara replied pleasantly. I'm sure it's nothing. But for our records, could you provide documentation of that restructuring? It would help maintain clean audit trails. It was a reasonable request, professionally delivered, but it was also a trap. If Hariri was legitimate, he'd produce the documentation easily. If he was running a shell game with fake suppliers, he'd have to either admit the problem or try to fabricate evidence on the spot. Hariri's eyes flickered to Yoon, clearly recalculating. I can have my people send that over by tomorrow. Perfect, Amara said, making a note. I look forward to reviewing it. The meeting wrapped up 20 minutes later with cordial handshakes and promises to follow up pending the additional documentation. When Hariri left, Yoon, Tunde, and Amara remained in the private room, the door closed against eavesdropping. Well? Yoon asked, looking at Amara. He's lying about the supplier, Amara said immediately. The registration number discrepancies aren't administrative errors, they're evidence he's using multiple shell companies to obscure his actual supply chain. Either he's inflating costs and planning to pocket the difference, or his real suppliers are sanctioned entities he can't openly do business with. I agree, Tunde said, nodding. I missed the registration number detail initially. Good catch, Zainab. Yoon leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. So the question becomes, is he trying to con us, or is he trying to hide his own illegal suppliers while still delivering quality product? The latter, I think, Amara said, reviewing her notes. His volume projections are realistic. His pricing isn't inflated. Actually, it's slightly below market rate, which suggests he has access to discounted goods, probably through those sanctioned suppliers. He's not trying to cheat you on the deal itself. He's trying to hide the fact that his entire operation is built on circumventing international sanctions, which makes him vulnerable to exposure, but potentially a valuable long-term partner, Yoon concluded. If we proceed, we have leverage over him. We know his secret. That could be useful. Or it could mean he's sloppy. And sloppy partners become liabilities, Amara countered. She was challenging him, she realized, but not in a way that felt dangerous. This was intellectual debate, the kind she'd loved in university seminars. If I spotted those discrepancies in 1 hour, more sophisticated investigators could too. Valid point. Yoon stood, buttoning his suit jacket. We'll request his documentation and evaluate further. In the meantime, both of you did well today. Tunde, you handled the financial deep dive perfectly. Zainab, your eye for detail is exactly what I needed. Dinner tonight to celebrate your first field operation? It wasn't really a question, but Amara appreciated the courtesy of framing it as one. I'd like that. Dinner was at a rooftop restaurant in Ikoyi, private table, view of the Lagos Lagoon glittering with lights from the island. Yoon had dismissed Tunde and the security detail to give them privacy, which felt both trusting and slightly dangerous in ways Amara couldn't quite articulate. You exceeded my expectations today, Yoon said over glasses of expensive wine Amara was only pretending to sip. Hariri is experienced, careful. The fact that you identified his weakness so quickly is impressive. I had good teachers, Amara deflected. Tunde and you both prepared me well. Humility is admirable, but false modesty isn't. Yoon set down his wine glass, his dark eyes catching the ambient candlelight. You're exceptional at this work, Miss Okonkwo. Own that. It should have felt patronizing, a man telling her to claim her competence, but something in Yoon's delivery made it feel like simple fact-stating. He wasn't flattering her, he was correcting her self-assessment to match reality. Thank you, Amara said, meaning it. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Suya spiced steak for her, some kind of Korean fusion fish for him. The food was exquisite, the atmosphere surreal. 3 weeks ago, Amara had been hiding in a moldy hotel room. Tonight, she was dining with a crime lord who valued her intelligence enough to trust her with million-dollar deals. Can I ask you something personal? Amara said eventually, emboldened by the surreality of it all. You can ask. I'll decide whether to answer. Fair enough. Why Lagos? You're Korean. You could run operations anywhere. Why build your empire here specifically? Yoon was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Korea is complicated for someone like me. Too many established powers, too much surveillance, too many rules written by people who never intended to let outsiders win. West Africa is emerging markets, economic chaos, opportunity for those willing to navigate the instability. I came here 6 years ago with capital and connections, and I built something that couldn't exist anywhere else. You wanted somewhere you could be powerful on your own terms, Amara translated. Exactly. He smiled, and it reached his eyes this time. Not warm, but genuine. You understand ambition, don't you? That hunger to prove you're more than what everyone else decided you should be. Oh, she understood that. Understood it, bone deep after a year of being told she was too loud, too smart, too much. Yes, I understand that. That's why you'll succeed in this organization, Yoon said with certainty. Not because you're running from the Mensas, but because you're running toward something better. People motivated by fear are unreliable. People motivated by ambition are dangerous in all the right ways. The words settled over Amara like a challenge and a promise. Was she ambitious? She thought she was just surviving, but maybe survival had been the first step toward something larger. Maybe working for Yoon was less about hiding from her past and more about building a future where she controlled her own narrative. I want to learn everything, Amara said, the admission surprising her with its intensity. Not just the financial analysis. I want to understand how your entire operation works, the security protocols, the partner networks, the contingency plans. I want to be indispensable. Careful what you wish for, Yoon warned, but he looked pleased. Indispensable means you know too much to ever leave safely. It means you're committed until death or retirement, whichever comes first. I am already committed, Amara pointed out. The moment I got in your Range Rover, I crossed a line I can't uncross. Might as well cross it completely. Yoon raised his wine glass in a small salute. Then I'll ensure you get exactly what you want. Full access, complete education. We'll make you dangerous, Miss Okonkwo. Truly dangerous. They clinked glasses, and Amara felt the weight of that promise settle into her bones. Dangerous. Not victimized, not small, not something to be managed and controlled. Dangerous. She was beginning to like the sound of that. The ride back to the compound was quiet, Yoon reviewing something on his phone while Amara watched Lagos roll past the tinted windows. She was thinking about power, how it was acquired, how it was maintained, how Yoon wielded it with such casual precision. When they arrived back at the compound, Yoon walked her to her apartment despite having his own residence in another wing of the building. At her door, he paused. Tomorrow we'll start your expanded training, he said. You'll shadow me for a full day. Meetings, decisions, operations. You wanted to understand everything. Consider this your immersion. I'll be ready, Amara promised. I know you will. Yoon turned to leave, then hesitated. Ms. Okonkwo, Amara, what happened to you with the Mensah family was unjust and brutal, but it doesn't define your value. You define that. Remember that when we enter rooms where powerful men will try to diminish you. He left before she could respond, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Amara stood at her door for a long moment, processing the unexpected kindness in that statement. Yoon Ye-jun was a criminal, a manipulator, potentially a killer. But he'd just reminded her of her inherent worth in a way no one, not Dakarai, not even her mother in her worry, had done in years. Dangerous, Amara thought as she finally entered her apartment. She was falling into something dangerous that had nothing to do with crime and everything to do with the way Yoon's respect felt like oxygen after a year of suffocation. She'd deal with those feelings later. Tonight, she had documentation to review for tomorrow's shadowing exercise, but as Amara settled at her small desk with Tunde's files, she couldn't quite shake the memory of Yoon's smile across the dinner table, or the way his assessment of her value had made something in her chest warm and unfurl like a flower finding sunlight. Dangerous, indeed. 3 months into her new life as Zainab Okonkwo, Amara had almost convinced herself she was safe. Almost. The illusion shattered on a Tuesday afternoon when Tunde burst into the operations room, his usually calm demeanor replaced by sharp urgency. We have a problem, he announced, closing the door behind him and activating the room's privacy protocols, electronic countermeasures that scrambled any potential listening devices. The Mensah family just hired Babarin Security Solutions to locate you. Amara's blood went cold. Who? Private investigation firm. Very expensive. Very thorough. Tunde pulled up files on the main screen, a security company's website, personnel profiles, case histories. They specialize in finding people who don't want to be found. They have connections with police, customs, immigration. This is serious escalation. How did you learn this? Amara asked, her analytical mind engaging even as panic threatened at the edges of her thoughts. We monitor financial transactions for anyone connected to you or your old life. Kwame Mensah made a payment of 20 million naira to Babarinda yesterday. That's approximately $40,000 American. They're not playing anymore. 20 million naira. Amara's entire wedding had cost less than that. The Mensah family was willing to spend that much just to drag her back into their control. "Where's Yoon?" she asked. "Dealing with a situation in Abidjan. He'll be back tonight." "But Miss Okonkwo, there's more." Tunde's expression grew grimmer. "Babarinda already identified your mother as a leverage point. They have surveillance on her hospital." The fear crystallized into cold fury. "They're watching my mother." "Yes. And if they're competent, which they are, they'll eventually notice the counter-surveillance we have in place. Once they do, they'll know someone with significant resources is protecting both of you. That could lead them back to us." Amara stood, pacing the operations room as her mind raced through scenarios. "What are our options?" "We could eliminate the Babarindi operatives," Tunde said carefully. "Remove the immediate threat, but that would draw attention we don't need. Investigators going missing tends to trigger police involvement. Alternatively, we could feed them false information, lead them away from you entirely. But that requires time and precision. Or, Amara said slowly, an idea forming, we could solve the root problem. The Mensah family won't stop until they face consequences. What would happen if their illegal activities were exposed?" Tunde's eyebrows rose. "You want to go on offense? They're hunters, right? Predators who think I'm prey." Amara felt something fierce and sharp crystallize in her chest. What if we remind them that even prey can bite? When Yoon returned that evening, Amara was waiting in his private office with Tunde, a comprehensive presentation prepared on the main screen. He entered, saw their setup, and immediately shed his jacket with the air of someone preparing for serious work. "The Mensah situation has escalated," he said without preamble. "I got Tunde's brief on the plane. You have a proposal?" "I do." Amara advanced the presentation to the first slide, a detailed family tree of the Mensah business empire. Kwame, Kofi, and Dakarai aren't actually successful businessmen. They're coasting on their father's legitimate textile import company, which they've been slowly corrupting with side ventures in counterfeit goods. Tunde helped me pull their financial records. They're importing fake designer textiles from China, rebranding them as authentic, and selling them to high-end boutiques throughout Lagos and Accra. "That's relatively small-time fraud," Yoon observed. "Not enough to cripple them." "True, but the boutiques they're selling to include shops owned by the families of 3 Nigerian senators and 2 Ghanaian parliament members." Amara pulled up names, photographs, business connections. These politicians can't afford to be associated with counterfeiting scandals. It would destroy their carefully cultivated images. If we expose the Mensah fraud with irrefutable evidence, those politicians will turn on them instantly to protect themselves. Yoon leaned back against his desk, his expression thoughtful. "You want to leverage political pressure to dismantle their business and social standing." "I want to make them understand that pursuing me costs more than leaving me alone," Amara corrected. "Right now, they think I'm a runaway wife with no power. If we destroy their business, discredit them publicly, and ensure they understand exactly who orchestrated it, they'll realize I'm protected by someone who can reach into their lives at will. That's a much more effective deterrent than just hiding." Tunde nodded slowly. "It's bold. Requires exposing ourselves as having resources beyond what Zainab Okonkwo's cover story would explain. But the Mensahs aren't sophisticated enough to trace it back to us specifically. They'll just know someone powerful is protecting you." "What evidence do you have?" Yoon asked Amara directly. She'd anticipated this question, had spent the past 8 hours compiling with Tunde's help. Shipping manifests showing discrepancies between declared goods and actual contents. Financial records proving they're paying Chinese manufacturers for counterfeit materials while their customs declarations claim authentic sourcing. Communication intercepts, emails where they explicitly discuss the fraud. And most damning, we have photographs of their warehouse in Ikeja, with clearly labeled counterfeit goods stored alongside legitimate inventory. "How did you get into their warehouse?" "I didn't. I paid a contact Tunde introduced me to. A security guard at the warehouse compound who needed extra money and was willing to take photos during his overnight shift. Cost 50,000 naira and minimal risk." Yoon's lips curved into that almost smile that meant approval. "You've learned quickly. But this plan has a significant flaw. It will hurt the Mensahs, but it won't necessarily stop them from hunting you. Desperate, humiliated men are often more dangerous, not less. Which is why Phase 2 involves direct confrontation," Amara said, advancing the presentation to her next slide. "Once they're weakened by the business exposure, we approach them directly. You approach them. Make it clear that continued pursuit of me will result in worse consequences. Criminal charges, complete business destruction, personal harm. Offer them a way out. They leave me alone entirely, pretend I never existed, and in exchange, no further action will be taken against them. Blackmail and coercion, Yoon summarized. Are you comfortable with that? It was a genuine question. He was giving her the opportunity to step back, to choose a less morally compromising path. Amara thought about Dakarai's fists, about Afua's mocking laughter, about 3 months of fear and hiding. Thought about her mother being watched by investigators who wouldn't hesitate to use her as bait. I'm comfortable with survival, Amara said firmly. If that requires making the Menses hurt the way they hurt me, not physically, but where it matters to them, in their pride and their business, then yes, I'm comfortable with that. Yoon held her gaze for a long moment, and Amara felt herself being measured against some internal standard she couldn't quite identify. Then he nodded once, decisively. Tunde, begin phase 1 immediately. Contact our media sources. I want the counterfeit scandal story to break in 48 hours across multiple news outlets simultaneously. Make it look like investigative journalism, not a targeted attack. I'm on it, boss. Tunde was already typing, his fingers flying across multiple keyboards. Yoon turned to Amara. You and I will handle phase 2 personally. 3 days from now, we'll pay a visit to the Mensa family compound. I want you there when we deliver the ultimatum. You want me in the room? Amara's pulse spiked. Wouldn't it be safer to? Safety isn't the goal. Power demonstration is. Yoon's eyes glinted with something predatory. They need to see that the woman they tried to break is now protected by someone who can destroy them. They need to understand viscerally that you're no longer prey. Your presence makes that message unmistakable. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Amara nodded. Then I'll be there. The next 3 days moved with orchestrated precision. The counterfeit scandal broke exactly as planned. 3 major Nigerian newspapers and 2 Ghanaian outlets simultaneously published investigative pieces exposing the Mensa family's fraud. The evidence was damning, the political fallout immediate. Within 24 hours, 2 senators and 1 parliament member publicly severed business ties with Mensa Textiles. Police announced investigations into the counterfeiting operation. The family's carefully maintained reputation as upstanding businessmen crumbled like a house built on sand. Amara watched it unfold from the operations room, Tunde providing real-time updates as the scandal metastasized across social media and traditional news. She felt no guilt, only grim satisfaction. This was justice, not in legal terms, but in practical ones. The Mensas had spent years profiting through dishonesty. Now they'd pay the price. They're panicking, Tunde reported on the 3rd day. Kwame tried to call in favors with 3 different police commissioners. All 3 refused to take his calls. Kofi attempted to bribe the lead investigative journalist. She recorded the conversation and published it, which made things worse. And Dakarai, Tunde paused, his expression darkening. Dakarai posted on social media that you're mentally ill and fabricated lies to destroy his family. He's painting himself as the victim of a vindictive ex-wife. White-hot rage flashed through Amara's chest. Of course Dakarai would do that. Spin himself as the wronged party, use her mental health as a weapon. It was exactly the kind of manipulation he'd perfected during their marriage. Let him, she said coldly. By tomorrow, it won't matter what he says. That evening, Yoon briefed her on the confrontation protocol. They sat in his office, the Lagos skyline glittering beyond the windows like a kingdom spread at their feet. The Mensa family compound is in Lekki Phase 2. Yoon explained, pulling up a satellite image on his tablet. Gated estate, private security, nothing sophisticated but enough to make them feel safe. We'll arrive at 7 p.m. just after dinner when the whole family is likely to be present. I want them all there for this. What's the security plan? Amara asked, trying to ignore the nervous energy coiling in her stomach. 4 of my people will accompany us, Instructor Park leading. They'll handle any physical issues that arise, but I don't anticipate violence. The Mensas are bullies, not fighters. Once they understand the power differential, they'll fold. Yoon set down the tablet, his dark eyes focusing on Amara with characteristic intensity. But I need to know you can handle seeing Dakarai again without losing composure. If you can't, there's no shame in letting me handle this alone. It was a fair concern. 3 months ago, the thought of facing Dakarai would have paralyzed Amara with fear. But 3 months of training with Park, of analyzing criminal operations, of being treated as an intelligent equal instead of a punching bag, had rebuilt something in her that Dakarai had tried to destroy. I can handle it, Amara said. I need to handle it. He needs to see that I'm not his victim anymore. You were never his victim in the way he thinks, Yoon observed quietly. You were his target, which is different. Victims are helpless. Targets fight back when they get the opportunity. You're fighting back now. The distinction settled into Amara's understanding like a key finding its lock. Yes, she was fighting back, using every skill she'd learned, every resource Yoon had provided. This wasn't weakness or vengeance, it was strategic retaliation. What should I wear? She asked, thinking about image and psychological impact. Business professional, Yoon advised. You're not going as the woman they remember. You're going as Zainab Okonkwo, professional analyst, protected asset of a powerful organization. Look like success. Look untouchable. The next evening, Amara dressed in the outfit she and Yoon had selected. A tailored charcoal pantsuit that emphasized her curves without sexualizing them. A deep blue blouse the color of midnight, professional heels that added 3 inches to her height. Her natural hair was styled in elegant twists, her makeup minimal but flawless. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. This woman looked capable, dangerous, entirely in control. Perfect. Yoon met her at the compound entrance, flanked by Instructor Park and 3 other security personnel Amara recognized from her training sessions. He wore one of his signature black suits, but tonight he'd added a subtle detail, a tie pin in the shape of a small dragon, the same symbol from the business card he'd given her all those months ago. Ready? He asked. Ready, Amara confirmed. The drive to the Mensa compound took 30 minutes through Lagos's evening traffic. Amara spent it controlling her breathing, centering herself the way Park had taught her. Fear was acceptable. Fear kept you alert, but panic was the enemy. The Mensa estate gate was manned by 2 security guards who immediately stiffened when Yoon's convoy pulled up. 3 black SUVs, clearly expensive, clearly coordinated. Yoon rolled down his window, and 1 guard approached nervously. We're here to see the Mensa family, Yoon said pleasantly. They're expecting us. They weren't, of course, but the guard didn't know that. He radioed ahead, received confused responses, but the presence of 3 luxury vehicles and professionally dressed occupants apparently convinced him this was legitimate business. The gate opened. As they drove through, Amara recognized the grounds. She'd lived here for 3 months before escaping, though the compound looked different now, less intimidating. Just a wealthy family's ostentatious display, nothing more. The main house was a sprawling modern structure, all white stone and glass. Lights blazed from every window. As Yoon's SUV stopped at the main entrance, the front door opened and Kwame emerged, his face a mask of confusion and growing alarm. Who are you? He demanded in Yoruba as Yoon exited the vehicle. What is this about? English, please, Yoon replied smoothly, his accent making it a polite request that somehow sounded like a command. I'm here to discuss a business matter with your family, all of them. I suggest you gather everyone in your formal living room. Kwame's eyes widened as Amara stepped out of the SUV behind Yoon. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by shock and then rage. You're the one who exposed your counterfeiting operation. Amara finished coolly, using Zainab's confidence like armor. Yes, among other things. I suggest you do as Mr. Yoon requested. We have important matters to discuss. Kwame looked like he wanted to grab her, to drag her back into the house like property. But Instructor Park had positioned herself between them, her compact frame radiating lethal capability, and Yoon's other security personnel had fanned out in a subtle but unmistakable formation. The power differential was crystal clear. Kwame and his family were outmatched. Fine, Kwame spat. Come inside, but whatever this is, you're making a mistake. The only mistake was yours, Yoon said quietly, when you decided to hunt something that didn't belong to you. They followed Kwame into the house Amara had once called home in the most miserable sense of the word. The formal living room was exactly as she remembered. Expensive furniture chosen for status rather than comfort, family photographs on the walls documenting achievements and connections, the faint smell of the incense Efwa burned constantly. Within 5 minutes, the entire Mensa family had assembled. Kwame and Kofi, standing with aggressive postures, trying to look intimidating, but just looking frightened. Their father, Nana Mensa, elderly but still commanding, seated in the place of honor with confusion creasing his weathered face. Their mother, Efwa, her expression cycling between outrage and calculation, and Dakarai. He stood near the window, and when Amara entered the room, his face went through a rapid sequence of emotions. Shock, recognition, hatred, and something that might have been fear. He'd lost weight since she'd seen him last, looked haggard. The scandal had taken its toll. Good. What is the meaning of this intrusion? Nana Mensa demanded in Twi-accented English. Kwame says you've made accusations against our family. Not accusations, facts, Yoon interrupted calmly. He hadn't accepted the hospitality the Mensas were required by culture to offer. This wasn't a social visit. Your sons have been running a counterfeiting operation through your textile business for approximately 18 months. The evidence has been provided to multiple news outlets and law enforcement agencies. Your business reputation is destroyed, your political connections severed. This you already know. Who are you? Afua hissed. And why is that ungrateful girl with you? This ungrateful girl, Amara said, stepping forward before Yoon could answer, is the reason you're not already in jail. I could have provided evidence of the physical abuse Dakarai inflicted during our marriage, the financial theft. You took the money my mother gave for the wedding and never used it for its intended purpose, the systematic isolation and psychological torture your family enacted. But I chose to focus on your business crimes instead. Be grateful. Dakarai lunged forward. You lying! Instructor Park moved like water, inserting herself between Dakarai and Amara with a hand on his chest that stopped him cold. She said nothing, just applied enough pressure to make him step back, her expression utterly neutral. You will not touch her, Park said quietly. You will not approach her. You will listen. Yoon pulled out a tablet, brought up documentation, and tossed it onto the coffee table. This is the evidence we possess regarding your counterfeiting operation, but we also have this. He swiped to different files. Medical records from Amara's hospital visits during her marriage, photographs of injuries, testimony from neighbors who heard the discipline sessions, text messages between family members discussing how to handle her. The room went silent. Amara's heart pounded. She hadn't known Yoon had compiled all of that, had built a complete case against them. If we provide this to authorities, Yoon continued, the counterfeiting becomes the least of your problems. Domestic violence, conspiracy, fraud. The Mensa name will be synonymous with criminal enterprise. Your father's legitimate legacy will be destroyed entirely. Your mother will be investigated as an accessory. Your extended family's businesses will suffer by association. What do you want? Nana Mensa asked, his voice heavy with the weight of understanding. He was old, experienced enough to recognize when he'd been outmaneuvered. Simple terms, Yoon said. You will cease all attempts to locate, contact, or harm Amara Jones or any member of her family. You will publicly retract Dakarai's social media claims about her mental health and issue a statement that the marriage ended by mutual agreement with no fault on either side. You will ensure that Babarinda Security Solutions terminates their investigation immediately, and you will never speak her name again. And if we refuse, Kofi asked, trying to sound tough but failing, then I will systematically dismantle everything you've built, Yoon replied, with the calm certainty of someone who absolutely meant it. Your business, your reputation, your freedom. I have resources you can't imagine and patience you can't outlast. This is your only opportunity for a negotiated peace. Amara watched the family's resistance crumble in real time. They'd been powerful in their small sphere, had grown accustomed to bullying people like her who had no protection. But faced with actual power, organized, ruthless, strategic, they were nothing. I want to hear it from her, Dakarai said suddenly, his voice cracking. I want Amara to tell me why she destroyed us. Every eye in the room turned to Amara. Yoon raised an eyebrow slightly, giving her the choice to speak or remain silent. This was her moment, the confrontation she'd imagined 1,000 times during sleepless nights in cheap hotels. You want to know why? Amara asked, her voice steady despite the emotion churning in her chest. She walked closer to Dakarai, stopping just outside his reach. Because you spent a year trying to break me. Because your mother laughed when you hit me. Because your brothers threatened me when I tried to leave. Because all of you treated me like property instead of a person. She turned to address the entire family. I didn't destroy you. You destroyed yourselves by being criminals who thought they were untouchable. I just made sure the world saw what you really are. And now you have a choice. Leave me alone and rebuild what you can, or keep coming after me and lose everything. The silence that followed was profound. Afua looked like she wanted to speak, to defend her sons, but even she recognized the futility. Nana Mensa's shoulders had slumped in defeat. We accept your terms, the elderly patriarch said finally. The pursuit of Amara Jones ends tonight. We will issue the retraction, call off the investigators, and consider this matter closed. Smart decision, Yoon said. He pulled out a document from his jacket, placed it on the table. This is a written agreement to that effect. Sign it, all of you. For the next 10 minutes, Amara watched as each member of the Mensa family signed away their claim to her life. Dakarai's hand shook as he scrawled his signature. Kwame and Kofi signed with visible resentment. Afua's signature was a sharp, angry slash of ink. Nana Mensa signed with the heavy resignation of a man who'd watched his legacy tarnish. When the last signature was complete, Yoon collected the document, photographed it with his phone, and nodded to his security team. "We're done here." As they walked toward the exit, Amara paused at the doorway, looking back one final time at the family that had nearly destroyed her. They looked small now, diminished, their power revealed as the illusion it had always been. "Goodbye, Dakarai," she said softly. "I hope you learn to be better than this, but I'll never know either way, because you'll never see me again." She walked out of the Mensa compound with her head high, Yoon beside her, Park and the security team surrounding them like living shields. The night air felt cleaner somehow, as if the confrontation had purged something toxic from her lungs. In the SUV, as they pulled away from the estate, Amara felt something release in her chest, a tension she'd been carrying for so long it had become part of her baseline state. It was over, truly over. The Mensas would honor the agreement out of pure self-preservation, and she was finally, completely free. "You did well," Yoon said quietly beside her. "Better than well. You were magnificent." "I had a good teacher," Amara replied. "And good protection. You had courage. That was all you." He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Respect, certainly, but something else underneath it. Something warmer. "How do you feel?" Amara considered the question honestly. "Powerful," she said finally. "For the first time in my life, I feel powerful." Yoon's smile was small but genuine. "Good, because you are. And tomorrow we'll discuss what you want to do with that power. Tonight, we celebrate." The celebration was quiet. Just Yoon, Amara, Tunde, and Instructor Park in Yoon's private dining room. Expensive wine and food prepared by Mrs. Han. They toasted Amara's victory, shared stories of their own past confrontations, and for the first time since joining Yoon's organization, Amara felt like she belonged to something larger than survival. She belonged to a team, a family of sorts, bound not by blood but by mutual protection and shared purpose. "Oh, so what happens now?" Tunde asked as they finished dessert. "Miss Okonkwo has settled her past. Does she stay on as analyst or move to a different role?" "That's her choice," Yoon said, looking at Amara. "You've fulfilled your initial agreement, protection for work. The Mensa threat is neutralized. If you want to take your new identity and relocate anywhere in the world, I'll honor that. Or you can stay and build something here." It should have been an easy decision. Take the freedom, start fresh somewhere anonymous and safe. But as Amara looked around the table at the people who'd trained her, protected her, respected her intelligence, and treated her like an equal, she realized she didn't want to leave. She wanted to stay, wanted to keep learning, keep growing into the powerful version of herself that Yoon had helped her discover, wanted to be part of something that, while morally complex, was honest in its complexity. "I want to stay," Amara said. "But I want expanded responsibilities. I've proven I can handle high-stakes operations. I want to move beyond just analysis. I want to be involved in strategy, in planning, in the bigger picture." Yoon's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, as if she'd passed yet another test he'd set without telling her. "Then that's exactly what you'll get. Welcome to the inner circle, Miss Okonkwo. Things are about to get much more interesting." They clinked glasses one more time, and Amara felt the future opening before her like a door she'd unlocked herself. 3 months of hiding had led to 3 months of transformation, and now, finally, she was ready to see just how dangerous she could become. 2 weeks after the Mensa confrontation, Amara stood in the operations room reviewing shipping manifests when alarms screamed through the compound's security system. "Breach at the East Gate!" Tunde shouted, his fingers flying across keyboards as security camera feeds populated the main screens. "Multiple vehicles, armed personnel. This is a coordinated attack." Amara's blood went cold as she recognized the tactical vests and weapons on the screens. Professional mercenaries, at least a dozen of them, moving with military precision toward the main compound building. "Who are they?" she demanded. "Unknown," Tunde replied, his voice tight with stress, "but they're using equipment that costs serious money. This isn't random. Someone sent them specifically." Instructor Park burst into the operations room, weapon drawn. "Miss Okonkwo, we need to move you to the safe room now. This is a direct assault." "Where's Yoon?" Amara asked, even as Park was pulling her toward the reinforced panic room built into the compound's core. "Handling the defense. He'll join us once—" The building shook with an explosion. Close, too close. Park shoved Amara into the safe room, a steel-reinforced chamber with its own communications equipment and supplies for extended siege. Tunde was already there, having run from the operations room through a connecting passage. His hands were shaking as he tried to maintain the security feeds on a backup system. "They breached the perimeter," he reported. 4 of our security personnel down, injured, not dead. These attackers are using non-lethal force where possible, which means they want something specific. They want me, Amara realized with sick certainty. Someone hired them to extract me. The Mensas? Park asked, checking her weapons magazine with practiced efficiency. Maybe, or someone who found out about my value to Yoon's operations. Amara forced her mind to work analytically despite the fear. Tunde, can you access financial transactions from the past 2 weeks? Look for large payments to known mercenary companies or security contractors. Her fingers were steadier than she expected as she helped Tunde pull up the databases she'd been learning to navigate. Even in crisis, her training kicked in. Analyze, identify patterns, find the weakness. There, Tunde pointed to a transaction. 5 million naira paid to Omega Tactical Solutions 3 days ago. Source account belongs to... Oh no. What? Amara leaned closer to the screen. Hariri. Rafik Hariri, the Lebanese businessman from the meeting months ago. The one you identified as using shell companies and sanctioned suppliers. The pieces clicked together in Amara's mind with devastating clarity. He failed to provide the documentation we requested. Yoon must have declined the partnership, maybe even threatened to expose Hariri's sanction violations. So Hariri decided to retaliate by taking Yoon's most valuable analyst, me. Why not just kill you? Park asked bluntly. Because I know things. I've been analyzing Yoon's entire operation for 3 months. I could be interrogated, forced to provide information Hariri could sell to competitors or use for his own advantage. Amara felt fury cutting through her fear. He thinks I'm a weak point to exploit. Another explosion rocked the compound, followed by gunfire. On the security feeds, Amara could see Yoon's security team engaging the mercenaries with tactical efficiency, but they were outnumbered. The attackers were pushing steadily toward the main building, toward this safe room. We need to contact Yoon, Amara said. Where is he? Leading the defense from the north wing, Tunde replied. He's cut off from us by the main assault force. Miss Okonkwo, we might need to consider evacuation. No. Amara's voice came out harder than intended. No more running. I'm done being the target everyone thinks they can leverage. Tunde, can you access Hariri's phone records from our intelligence database? Probably. But why? Because if he hired these mercenaries, he's probably coordinating with them remotely. If we can intercept his communications, we can feed him false information, create chaos in his attack plan. Park's eyes widened with understanding. You want to turn his own operation against him? Exactly. Amara was already pulling up the system she'd learned to use. He thinks I'm weak, thinks taking me will hurt Yoon and give him leverage. Let's show him exactly how wrong he is. For the next frantic 10 minutes, Amara worked with a focus that burned away everything except the problem in front of her. She intercepted Hariri's communication channel with the mercenary team, identified the frequency they were using for coordination, and crafted a message using Hariri's communication style that she'd studied from their previous business interactions. Tunde, send this on Hariri's channel. Abort extraction. Target has been moved to secondary location. Withdraw immediately and await new coordinates. Make it look like it's coming from his phone. That might buy us minutes, not a solution, Tunde warned even as he executed the command. Minutes are enough. Amara pulled up building schematics, escape routes, defensive positions. Her mind was racing through scenarios with the same analytical precision she applied to financial fraud. Park, if I can lure the mercenary team into a trap, can you and the remaining security personnel neutralize them? Depends on the trap, Park said carefully. The East Storage Building, it's isolated, only one entrance. Reinforced walls. If we could get them inside and seal the entrance, they'd be contained without further casualties. Park studied the schematics, her tactical mind engaging. It could work, but how do you lure professional mercenaries into an obvious trap? By giving them what they came for. Amara met Park's eyes. Me. I'll let them think they've captured me, lead them to the storage building, and you seal them inside. Absolutely not, Park said flatly. Boss would kill me if I let you use yourself as bait. Boss isn't here to make this call, Amara countered, and I'm not asking permission. Tunde, send a second message on Hariri's channel. Target located in East Storage Facility. Minimum security. Proceed with extraction immediately. Miss Okonkwo, do it. Tunde hesitated, then his fingers moved across the keyboard. On the security feeds, the mercenary team, already confused by the abort message, suddenly shifted direction, consolidating and moving toward the East Storage Building with renewed purpose. They're taking the bait, Tunde breathed. Park, I need you to trust me, Amara said, strapping on a ballistic vest that had been stored in the safe room. Get your team in position around that building. Give me 5 minutes to get inside and make myself visible. Then seal every exit. Can you do that? Instructor Park looked torn between duty and respect for Amara's agency. Finally, she nodded. 5 minutes. But if you get hurt, I'll never forgive myself. If I get hurt, I'll have learned I'm not as smart as I think I am, Amara replied with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. Now move. The next 5 minutes were the longest of Amara's life. She exited the safe room through a service passage, made her way to the east storage building through routes the attacking mercenaries hadn't covered, and positioned herself near a window where she'd be visible but not immediately accessible. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she saw the tactical team approach, 12 armed professionals moving with coordinated precision. For a moment, doubt crashed over her. This was insane. She was a business analyst playing tactical games with trained killers. But then she thought about the Mensa family, about Dakarai's fists, about 3 months of running scared. She thought about Yoon telling her she was powerful, about the look in his eyes when she'd confronted her abusers. She thought about the woman she'd become in these past months, someone who analyzed problems and solved them, who didn't accept victimhood as her only option. The mercenaries breached the storage building entrance. Amara let them see her, let them think she was trapped and panicking. They moved toward her position with textbook tactical formation, communicating through hand signals and radio clicks. "Target acquired," one said into his radio. "Beginning extraction. Now." Amara triggered the remote signal she'd coordinated with Park. Steel shutters slammed down over the building's only entrance with a thunderous crash. Emergency locks engaged with mechanical finality. The lights cut out, replaced by red emergency lighting that painted everything in hellish shades. The mercenaries realized their mistake immediately. Weapons swung toward Amara, but she was already moving, throwing herself through a service door she'd pre-positioned herself near, one that led to a maintenance tunnel too small for grown men in tactical gear to follow easily. Behind her, she heard furious shouting, the sound of weapons being readied. But Park's voice came over the building's PA system, calm and professional. "Omega Tactical Team, you are surrounded and contained. Drop your weapons and surrender, and you will be released unharmed once local authorities arrive. Resist, and we will flood this building with tear gas and wait you out. You have 60 seconds to decide." Amara crawled through the maintenance tunnel, her expensive business clothes getting filthy, her heart still racing. She emerged in an adjacent building where Tunde was waiting, looking at her with something between horror and awe. "That was the most reckless, brilliant thing I've ever seen," he said. "Did they surrender?" Amara asked, brushing concrete dust from her hair. "They're negotiating terms right now. Park is a very persuasive negotiator." Tunde pulled up security feeds showing the contained mercenaries lowering their weapons, their team leader communicating with someone on radio, probably Hariri, realizing his expensive assault had just been turned into a complete disaster. Good. Amara's legs felt shaky now that the adrenaline was ebbing. "Now we need to what?" Yoon's voice cut through the space like a blade. Amara turned to find him standing in the doorway, his suit torn and dusty, a small cut above his left eyebrow, his expression absolutely thunderous. "Need to explain why you used yourself as bait against professional mercenaries without consulting me?" he continued, his voice deadly quiet. "You were cut off by the assault," Amara said, lifting her chin despite the guilt churning in her stomach. "I made a tactical decision based on available resources and acceptable risk factors. You are the resource I was trying to protect." Yoon's control cracked slightly, real emotion bleeding through his usual calculated demeanor. "If they'd shot you, if you'd been injured or taken—" "But I wasn't." Amara stepped closer to him, meeting his anger with her own fierce certainty. "I analyzed the situation, identified a solution, and executed it successfully. Isn't that exactly what you've been training me to do? To think strategically, to use every advantage, to not be prey? Not at the risk of your own life. My life was already at risk. They came here for me, Yoon. Hariri targeted me specifically because he knows I'm valuable to you, because I've been working at the heart of your operations. Running and hiding in a safe room wasn't going to change that. It would just make me a passive victim waiting to be extracted. I chose to be active instead." They stared at each other, the air between them crackling with tension. Anger, yes, but something else too. Something that had been building for months through late-night strategy sessions and shared victories, through Yoon's unexpected kindness and Amara's growing competence. "Don't ever do that again," Yoon said finally, his voice rough. "I can't promise that," Amara replied honestly. "Not if the tactical situation demands it. You taught me to use every advantage, to be ruthless in pursuit of objectives. That's what I did." Yoon's expression shifted, the anger bleeding away into something that looked almost like wonder. "You've become exactly what I hoped you would. Dangerous, strategic, fearless. I learned from the best." Amara felt her own anger dissolving, replaced by the warm recognition of his approval. "So what happens now? We have a dozen mercenaries contained, and a Lebanese businessman who just tried to assault your compound. How do we respond?" A slow, predatory smile spread across Yoon's face, the kind of smile that meant someone was about to learn a very painful lesson. "Now, Miss Okonkwo, we show Rafik Hariri and anyone else who might be watching exactly what happens when someone attacks what's mine, and you're going to help me plan every detail of his destruction." The next 72 hours were a masterclass in systematic retaliation. Amara worked alongside Yoon, Tunda, and Park to dismantle Rafik Hariri's entire West African operation with surgical precision. They exposed his sanction violations to international authorities, provided evidence of his shell company fraud to financial regulators, and ensured that every business partner who'd enabled his operations faced their own investigations. The mercenaries, after surrendering, provided detailed testimony about Hariri's hiring practices in exchange for leniency. Nigerian police arrested Hariri as he tried to flee the country, and his extradition to Lebanon to face sanction violation charges was already being processed. It was comprehensive, devastating, and deeply satisfying. "How does it feel?" Yoon asked on the third evening as they watched news coverage of Hariri's arrest from Yoon's private office. "Like justice," Amara replied. "Like power used correctly." They stood side by side at the windows overlooking Lagos's nighttime sprawl, the city lights spreading beneath them like stars made terrestrial. Amara was aware of Yoon's proximity in a way that had nothing to do with physical threat and everything to do with the connection they'd forged through months of working together. "You've changed," Yoon observed quietly. "The woman I picked up from that parking lot 3 months ago would never have used herself as tactical bait. That woman was afraid of her own shadow," Amara said. "This woman, Zainab, or Amara, or whoever I'm becoming, she's learned that fear can be a tool instead of a prison. You taught me that. I taught you analysis and strategy. The courage was always yours." Yoon turned to face her fully, his dark eyes reflecting the city lights. "I've been thinking about your role in this organization. Are you promoting me or firing me?" Amara asked with a slight smile. "Neither. Both." Yoon's expression was unreadable. "You've proven yourself beyond analyst work. You think strategically, you understand power dynamics, you're willing to take calculated risks. Those are leadership qualities. I want you as my partner, not employee, not asset. Equal partner in building this empire." The offer landed like a physical thing, heavy with implications. Partnership with Yoon meant complete commitment to his world, to operations that existed in moral gray zones, to a life that would never be simple or safe. But it also meant autonomy, power, respect, and the chance to build something significant, using every skill she'd worked so hard to develop. "What does partnership look like?" Amara asked carefully. "Equal say in major decisions, profit sharing, your own operations to manage as you see fit, supported by organizational resources, and—" Yoon hesitated, which was so uncharacteristic that Amara's attention sharpened, "and acknowledgement that what we've built together goes beyond business." Her heart stuttered. "Yoon, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," he said quickly. "But I would be lying if I claimed my investment in your safety and success is purely professional. You've become important to me, Amara. Beyond your utility, beyond your skills. You, specifically." It should have terrified her. The intensity of his admission, the vulnerability in his usually controlled expression. After Dakarai, the thought of any man claiming importance in her life should have triggered every alarm. But this was different. Yoon had never tried to diminish her, had actively worked to build her up, had respected her intelligence and her autonomy, even when disagreeing with her choices. What he was offering wasn't possession. It was partnership, the kind she'd never imagined possible. "I need time to think," Amara said honestly. "Not about the business partnership. I want that. But the rest, I need to make sure I'm choosing it because I genuinely want it, not because I'm grateful or because you've provided safety." "Take all the time you need," Yoon said, and she believed him. "I'm a patient man when it matters." That night, Amara sat in her private apartment reviewing everything that had happened since that rainy night when Yoon's business card had appeared on her cafe table. She'd gone from victim to survivor to strategist to partner, not in a straight line, but through a series of transformations, each one building on the last. She thought about her mother's warning. People who value you for what you can do for them aren't the same as people who value you for who you are. But was that true of Yoon? Yes, he valued her skills, her intelligence, her strategic mind. But he'd also protected her mother before she'd agreed to work for him, had given her autonomy instead of control, had been furious when she'd risked herself, not because it jeopardized his operations, but because he cared about her safety specifically. The difference between Yoon and Dakarai was stark. Dakarai had wanted to break her down to feel powerful. Yoon wanted to build her up because her strength made them both stronger. That wasn't the same as being valued only for utility. That was being valued as an equal partner. Amara stood and walked to her window, looking out at the compound that had become her sanctuary and her proving ground. In 6 months, she'd transformed from a terrified woman hiding in cheap hotels to someone who could analyze criminal operations, negotiate with dangerous men, and use herself as tactical bait to protect the people who'd become her family. She'd become dangerous in exactly the way Yoon had promised, not through violence alone, but through intelligence, courage, and the willingness to see opportunities where others saw only threats. And Yoon. Yoon had been the catalyst for that transformation, yes, but he'd also been honest about what he wanted, transparent about the costs, respectful of her boundaries even when pushing her to exceed them. That mattered. Her phone buzzed. The secure line. Yoon's name appeared on the screen. "I know you said you need time," his voice came through when she answered, "but I wanted to make sure you're actually resting and not overthinking in circles." Despite herself, Amara smiled. "How do you know I'm not already asleep?" "Because I know you. Your mind doesn't stop analyzing just because the crisis is over. You're probably reviewing every variable, building decision trees, trying to optimize for the perfect answer." A pause. "There isn't a perfect answer, Amara. There's only what you genuinely want versus what you think you should want." He was right, of course. She'd been analyzing this like it was a business decision instead of a personal one. "What do you genuinely want?" she asked. "You. As my partner in every sense of the word. Someone I can build with, strategize with, trust completely. Someone who challenges me and makes me better." His voice softened. "Someone who makes me want to be more than just calculating and ruthless. You make me want to be worthy of your respect." Amara's breath caught. That vulnerability, coming from a man who presented himself as controlled and dangerous to the world, was perhaps the most honest thing she'd ever heard. "I want that too," she said, the words emerging before her analytical mind could interfere. "I want partnership with you, all of it. Business and personal. I'm choosing this, choosing you, not because I'm grateful or afraid or don't have other options. I'm choosing this because for the first time in my life, I feel like I can be powerful and whole and myself all at once." The silence on the other end lasted several heartbeats. Then, "I'll be at your door in 3 minutes. We should have this conversation face to face." He hung up before she could respond. Yoon arrived in exactly 2 minutes and 45 seconds. When Amara opened her door, he stood there still in his torn suit from the assault, the cut above his eyebrow cleaned but not bandaged, looking more human and less controlled than she'd ever seen him. "I meant what I said," he began without preamble. "About wanting you as my partner, about—" Amara stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't calculated or strategic. It was pure impulse, 6 months of building tension and mutual respect, and something deeper than either of them had wanted to acknowledge. Yoon froze for half a second in surprise, then his arms came around her, pulling her closer as he kissed her back with an intensity that matched his personality. Controlled but fierce, careful but passionate. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder, Yoon rested his forehead against hers. "So, that's a yes to the partnership?" "That's a yes to everything," Amara confirmed. "Business partner, personal partner, equal in all of it." "Equal," Yoon agreed, "which means you get to help me decide how to restructure our operations now that Hariri's network is dissolved, and you get veto power over any decision that affects your safety. And you get my complete honesty about when your plans have flaws," Amara countered, "and my analysis of every major operation before you execute." "Deal." He smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. "We're going to be terrifying together, Miss Okonkwo." "Damn right we are, Mr. Yoon." They stood there in her doorway, holding each other, two damaged people who'd found partnership in the most unlikely place. Outside, Lagos continued its eternal chaos. Inside this compound, inside this moment, Amara felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Peace. Not the peace of safety or comfort, but the peace of knowing exactly who she was and what she wanted. The peace of choosing her own path instead of having it chosen for her. "Stay with me tonight," Yoon said quietly. "Not for anything except, I don't want to be alone. I almost lost you today, and I need to know you're actually here and safe." It was vulnerability again, honest and raw. Amara nodded. "I'll stay." They moved into her apartment, Yoon closing the door behind them. The next several hours were spent not in passion, but in quiet conversation. About his childhood in Seoul, about her dreams before Dakarai, about the operations they'd build together, about the future they'd shape on their own terms. At some point, they fell asleep on her couch, Yoon's arms around her, her head on his chest. Two people who'd been alone for too long, finally finding belonging. Amara, who now answered equally to both Amara and Zainab depending on context, stood in the operations room reviewing the quarterly reports for their expanded empire. In the 6 months since she'd become Yoon's full partner, they'd doubled their legitimate operations, streamlined their gray market activities to minimize risk, and established themselves as one of the most formidable power couples in West African business, both legal and otherwise. These margin improvements are impressive, Tunde said, reviewing the same reports over her shoulder. Your restructuring of the logistics network saved us approximately 15% in operational costs and reduced our exposure to law enforcement by roughly 30%, Amara added with satisfaction. Efficiency and safety aren't mutually exclusive. The operations room had expanded. 3 new analysts working under Tunde's supervision, advanced computer systems, even more sophisticated intelligence gathering capabilities. Amara's office was adjacent, a space she'd designed herself with both functionality and comfort in mind. Instructor Park entered, looking professionally lethal as always. Boss wants you in the conference room. We have visitors. Amara followed Park through the compound, which had also grown. New security installations, expanded living quarters for key personnel, even a small medical facility. Yoon believed in protecting his people, and now that included a staff of nearly 50. In the conference room, Yoon sat at the head of the table with 3 well-dressed individuals Amara didn't recognize. 2 men and 1 woman, all looking nervous despite their expensive suits. "Ah, my partner," Yoon said as Amara entered, gesturing to the chair beside him, not across from him, but beside him, equal positioning. "These are representatives from a consortium interested in establishing shipping routes through our networks. I wanted your assessment before we proceed." For the next 2 hours, Amara did what she did best. Analyzed, questioned, identified inconsistencies and opportunities. The consortium was legitimate, but had connections to organizations that would make them risky partners. She outlined the concerns methodically, proposed mitigation strategies, and ultimately recommended a limited partnership with strict oversight. Yoon listened, asked clarifying questions, and when she finished, turned to the consortium representatives. "You've heard my partner's analysis. We'll proceed on the terms she outlined or not at all. You have 48 hours to decide." After they left, Yoon pulled Amara aside. "Brilliant as always. You saw the connections to the São Paulo operations that I missed entirely. That's why we're partners?" Amara said, kissing him briefly. "I see what you miss, you see what I miss. Together, we're comprehensive." "Speaking of comprehensive," Yoon said, his expression shifting to something more serious. "I received word from your mother's hospital. She's been asking about when she can meet me officially. I think she suspects there's more between us than just professional relationship." Amara's stomach tightened. She'd been calling her mother regularly, had even visited twice in the past 6 months, using carefully planned security protocols. But she'd been vague about the nature of her relationship with Yoon, knowing that explaining, "I'm in a romantic partnership with a Korean crime lord," wasn't a conversation one had over the phone. "Are you ready for that?" she asked carefully. "The question is whether you're ready for that," Yoon countered. "I'm willing to meet her, to be evaluated and judged and questioned about my intentions toward her daughter. But only if you want that level of integration between your past life and current one." Amara thought about her mother. Strong, perceptive, protective. Folak would see through any pretense, would demand honesty about what Amara had become and who she'd become it with. "I want her to meet you," Amara decided. "She deserves to know that I'm happy, that I'm safe, that the man I'm with respects me. And she deserves to decide for herself whether she can accept what we do. Then we'll arrange it," Yoon said simply. "I'll submit myself to maternal interrogation with the same courage I use for business negotiations." "She's scarier than most business partners," Amara warned with a smile. "I have no doubt." The meeting was arranged for the following Sunday, at a neutral location, a private room in a high-end restaurant in Victoria Island. Amara arrived early with Yoon, both dressed professionally, but not ostentatiously. This wasn't about displaying wealth, it was about showing respect. When Folek Jones entered the room, Amara's breath caught. Her mother looked older than 6 months ago, worry having carved lines around her eyes. But she also looked relieved, pulling Amara into a fierce embrace that spoke of months of fear and uncertainty. "My baby girl," Folaki whispered. "You look so different, stronger." "I am stronger, Mama." Amara stepped back, gesturing to Yoon. "This is Yoon Ye-jun. He's my business partner and my romantic partner, the person who protected me when I had nowhere else to go." Folek studied Yoon with the intense scrutiny only mothers possess. Yoon, to his credit, didn't flinch or try to charm. He simply bowed respectfully and said, "Mrs. Jones, your daughter is remarkable. I am honored to know her." "Sit," Folake commanded, taking her own seat, "and tell me exactly what you've gotten my daughter involved in." For the next hour, Yoon and Amara explained. Not everything, but enough. The nature of Yoon's operations, Amara's role as analyst and partner, the dangers they faced and the precautions they took. Yoon was honest about the moral gray zones, about the fact that their business operated outside conventional law, about the reality that Amara could never fully return to a normal civilian life. Folake listened without interrupting, her nurse's training giving her the ability to absorb difficult information without visible reaction. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You love my daughter," she said finally, looking at Yoon. Not a question. "Yes," Yoon replied without hesitation. "And you, Amara? You love him?" Amara met her mother's eyes. "Yes, Mama, I love him. I also respect him, trust him, and build something meaningful with him every day. He's not like Dakurai. He doesn't try to make me small. He helps me be bigger." Folak nodded slowly. "I can see that. You look alive again, the way you looked before that terrible family got their hooks in you." She turned back to Yoon. "I don't approve of everything you do. I'm a God-fearing woman, and I know what you described isn't entirely legal or entirely moral, but I also know my daughter. She wouldn't choose this, wouldn't choose you, if it wasn't right for her." "I understand your reservations," Yoon said. "I can only promise that I will protect her, respect her, and never try to control her, and that if she ever wants to leave this life, I'll help her do so safely." "See that you do." Folak reached across the table to grip both Amara's and Yoon's hands. "You're all she has now, young man. That's a sacred responsibility." "I take it very seriously," Yoon assured her. The rest of the lunch was lighter. Folake sharing stories from the hospital, Amara catching up on news from old friends, Yoon surprising everyone by being charming and attentive when he chose to be. By the end, Folake was smiling, some of the worry lines easing from her face. "You'll visit me again soon?" Folake asked as they prepared to leave. "Both of you?" "As often as we safely can," Amara promised. After her mother left, Amara and Yoon sat in the private room for a few more minutes, processing. "That went better than expected," Yoon observed. "She likes you," Amara said, surprised herself. "She actually likes you." "I'm likable when I try," Yoon replied with a slight smile. "And your mother is formidable. I can see where you get your strength." "And my stubbornness," Amara added. "That too." They left the restaurant hand in hand, Yoon's security team trailing at a discreet distance. As they drove back to the compound through Lagos's chaotic Sunday traffic, Amara reflected on how far she'd come. A year ago, she'd been trapped in an abusive marriage with no way out. 6 months ago, she'd been a terrified woman hiding from her past. Today, she was a powerful woman building her future with someone who saw her as an equal. It wasn't a conventional happy ending. Her life involved criminal operations, constant vigilance, moral complexity she'd never been trained to navigate, but it was her life, lived on her terms, with a partner who challenged and supported her in equal measure. "What are you thinking?" Yoon asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "That I'm happy," Amara said simply. "Genuinely happy. I didn't think that was possible anymore." Yoon lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "You deserve happiness. You fought for it, built it, claimed it. Never let anyone, including me, make you doubt that." "I won't," Amara promised, and she meant it. Back at the compound, they found the team gathered for their weekly strategy session. Tunda had intelligence on a potential new operation in Cameroon. Park had security upgrades to propose. The new analysts had identified patterns in competitor activities that required response. Amara slipped into her role seamlessly, equal partner, strategic thinker, the person Yoon trusted to see what he might miss. They worked together with the practiced efficiency of two people who'd learned each other's strengths and compensated for each other's weaknesses. When the meeting ended and the team dispersed, Yoon pulled Amara aside. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small box from his desk drawer. Amara opened it to find a pendant, a delicate dragon and lotus intertwined, crafted in white gold and emeralds, the same symbol from the business card he'd given her all those months ago. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It represents what we've built," Yoon explained, fastening it around her neck. "The dragon, power, protection, ambition, the lotus, growth through adversity, beauty emerging from murky waters. Together, they're stronger than either alone." Amara touched the pendant, feeling its weight settle against her collarbone. It was a claim and a promise. She belonged to this organization, to this partnership, to this man who'd helped her transform from prey into predator. "Thank you," she said, kissing him deeply, "for everything, for seeing me, protecting me, making me dangerous." Thank you for choosing to stay dangerous with me, Yoon replied, for being my partner in all things, for making this empire something worth building instead of just something profitable. They stood there in his office, the Lagos skyline glittering beyond the windows, two people who'd found each other in chaos and built something extraordinary from survival and strategy and growing love. Amara's phone buzzed. Tunde with questions about the Cameroon operation. Yoon's tablet lit up with security alerts requiring attention. The work never stopped. The dangers never fully disappeared, but neither did they face it alone anymore. Ready to conquer the rest of the evening? Yoon asked with a smile. With you? Amara grinned back.